A multi-million-dollar spaceship hurtles towards the moon at 60 kilometers a minute. An explosion rips through its delicate shell. The astronauts must abandon the crippled mothership, 250,000 miles from home.
It was pretty tight, pretty dicey.
Their only hope is to trust the hardware that betrayed them in a leap of faith that will become the most famous space rescue in history. April 13th, 1970.
Okay, C2 is showing Houston, we had a restart on our...
Commander Jim Lovell must get his crew back to Earth.
We're 200,000 miles out in an uncontrolled spacecraft. We were in serious trouble.
A single false move could kill them all.
What would you do?
Spring 1970, and the space race has been won in dramatic style. Less than a year ago, Neil Armstrong stepped onto the moon for the first time and made history. NASA has another 7 moon landings planned over the next 3 years. And today, Apollo 13 is undergoing final checks before launch. The mission commander is Jim Lovell, a 42-year-old father of 4.
I got into the elevator, went slowly up to 330 feet, and I thought to myself, these people are really serious. We're going to make a flight to the moon.
Lovell's mission is to explore the lunar highlands. The landing site could be treacherous, but the prize will be a new understanding of the moon's geology and natural resources.
It was quite a task, but I felt very confident that I could do it.
But as Apollo 13 prepares to leave Earth, it's clear that the public's appetite for space exploration has waned. Spaceflight seems to have become almost routine. In the run-up to 13's launch, a series of technical snags barely make the headlines. There is one malfunction that no one has discovered. During pre-flight tests, a heating element inside an oxygen tank fails, damaging some electrical insulation. Apollo 13 is hiding a potentially deadly flaw.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. We have commit and we have liftoff.
At 13:13 on Saturday, April 11th, a 36-story high Saturn V rocket lifts off from Kennedy Space Center in Florida. Less than 3 hours later, Apollo 13 is racing towards the moon at nearly 37,000 kilometers an hour, almost 10 times faster than a bullet.
Copy that, Houston.
Alongside Lovell are his crewmen, Fred Hayes and Jack Swigert, both crack military test pilots. This is their first time in space.
Space is a novelty with zero gravity. At times it seemed unreal. I'd say, am I really looking at this? Am I really here?
AV thrust normal, Houston.
Swigert, an Air Force pilot, joined the crew only 2 days ago, but he knows the command module as well as anyone.
Jack's a very competent pilot. He had actually written the malfunction procedures for the command module. So I had 2 very good people working with me.
Apollo 13 is made up of 2 independent spaceships. The command module, known as Odyssey, is the nerve center of the mission. The 6 cubic meter aluminium cone houses the 3 astronauts on the journey to and from the moon. Beneath Odyssey, inaccessible to the astronauts, is the service module, housing the giant main engine and Odyssey's life support systems. It's the heart and lungs of Apollo 13. Attached to the nose of the command module is the lunar lander, Aquarius. Equipped with its own engines, It's designed to ferry 2 of the astronauts between Odyssey and the surface of the moon. Thousands of miles away in Houston is NASA's Mission Control. Every twitch and pulse of 13's condition is monitored via a radio link to the ship's systems. Flight Director Gene Kranz leads a team of 25 flight controllers.
The flight director is basically the quarterback of the team. I'm the one calling the signals to not only the members of the mission control team, but the signals to the crew on board the spacecraft.
Kranz is a former fighter pilot and a seasoned rocket man. He was in charge when Apollo 11 made its historic moon landing.
Give me a status.
It is a place where you can measure yourself and see how you stand up.
Despite their cutting-edge technology, Kranz and his team have no direct control over the spacecraft itself.
Apollo 13, Houston, everything is hunky-dory.
The ship has its own guidance computer, programmed by the crew. 30 hours into the 10-day mission, Swigert enters instructions for a change of course. It's a critically important task. To get to the moon and back, the ship will have to make several course adjustments, burning the main engine for short periods at carefully calculated points. The crew must aim the spacecraft in the right direction when the engine is fired.
To change your path, to change your trajectory, you have to be able to point very accurately in 3 dimensions. If you're not pointing in the right direction, you're not going to end up in the right place.
To keep track of where it's pointing, the ship uses a gyroscope, mounted in sensitive cradles called gimbals. Like a kid's top, the spinning gyro keeps itself level, giving a reference point in space. The computer can detect any movement of the craft to within hundredths of a degree. An instrument called the 8-ball is connected to the gyro and displays the spaceship's orientation to the pilot, essential during any maneuver. Happy that the spaceship is pointing in the right direction, Swigert initiates an engine burn. 10,000 kilograms of thrust pushes the crew onto a course that will put them 100 kilometers above the rugged highlands in just over 2 days' time. A day later, Apollo 13 is cruising, and the crew get time to relax. At Mission Control in Houston, Cy Liebergott is in charge of the spaceship's environment and power, or ECOM.
I had 2 screens full of information beamed down from the spacecraft, and it was my job to really understand what all that information meant and to pick up on any changes.
Liebergott's been getting strange readings from the ship's 2 oxygen tanks. Located in the service module, the tanks supply breathing oxygen to the astronauts and also feed 3 fuel cells that generate the command module's electricity. Liebergott is unfazed by the readings. It's probably a routine instrumentation glitch with an equally routine solution.
I'd sure like to have Krauss or all 4 tanks.
Liebergott asks the crew to turn on fans inside the tank to stir up the O2. After a couple of minutes, he should have correct readings again.
We'd like it to stir up your cryo tank.
But no one knows Oxygen Tank 2 has a deadly flaw. Inside the sphere, due to the earlier malfunction, bare wiring is in contact with gaseous pure oxygen. A single spark could wreak havoc.
Jack acknowledged our request.
Stir up your cryo tank.
Okay.
And then he threw 2 switches.
For 16 seconds, the fan stirs the tank. Then, a spark. In a split second, the pressure in the tank rises.
I looked up at Fred Hayes, and I could tell from his expression that he had no idea what happened.
I could hear the metal crinkling. It made a little popping sound. So I knew it was something unusual and something probably bad.
An explosion in space is most likely to end in tragedy. The situation is now critical.
Okay, Houston, we've had a problem here.
The astronauts know only one thing. Something has gone terribly wrong. An oxygen tank has blown up on Apollo 13, 56 hours into their 4-day journey to the moon. At Mission Control in Houston, the ship's vital signs suddenly disappear from the consoles. 2 seconds later, when they pick up the radio signal again, the new data stream baffles flight controllers.
My screens are telling me that I've had multiple systems failures. I'm seeing oxygen tank number 2 data is gone. It doesn't make sense.
Okay, Houston, we've had a problem here. Stand by, they got a problem. Houston, we've had a problem. We've had a main beam bust on. We had a pretty large bang associated with the caution warning there.
Inside the command module, the crew are disoriented by a cascade of system failures and alarms.
We don't know how serious it is. We have no idea.
Lovell fears every astronaut's nightmare has finally come true.
I'm thinking that, well, maybe a meteor has hit our spacecraft.
Lovell knows that if the ship's skin is ruptured, they face a horrific death. Exposed to the vacuum of space, their lungs will burst instantly, followed by agonizing spasms as gas in their blood expands. It's what divers call the bends. In Houston, Flight Director Krantz is trying to make sense of the barrage of information.
I'm completely surrounded with reports coming in that I don't fully understand. But frankly, problems are our business. And I thought, we're going to solve this problem, get back on track. No big deal.
Larry, you don't believe that O2 tank 1 pressure, do you?
No, search tank's good.
We may have had an instrumentation problem, Roger.
I honed in on Ecom, Cy Liebergott, principally because he has the responsibility for those things you need to stay alive in space. Power, oxygen, pressure, heat, water.
Let's get our instrumentation lined up here, you guys.
Okay, now, Com, do we have instrumentation problems?
I'm realizing that I am the focal point of all this. Nothing to brag about.
Can we tell them anything? Do we have a real problem, or is it instrument?
While Houston struggles to make sense of the data stream, Lovell checks the ship's tank gauges. He's in for a shock.
The quantity gauge on one of our oxygen tanks read 0, and I could actually see the needle go down on the second quantity gauge very slowly.
Since oxygen is used both for breathing and as a source of power, it's vital they find the cause of the hemorrhage.
I knew we had an attack spacecraft, obviously. I was still breathing. There was no gaping hole that was letting air out.
With no sign of a meteor impact, they must search elsewhere. Lovell takes a look outside his window.
And I can't tell you today why I did it, but I saw escaping at a high rate of speed from the rear end of my spacecraft a gaseous substance.
It looks to me, looking out the hatch, that we are venting something. We are venting something out in space. Crew thinks they're venting. Target flight.
The cold chill of realization came in that we had a real problem. And I don't know what to do about it.
Krantz realizes that 56 hours into their mission, Apollo 13 is poised on the brink of catastrophe.
Then I moved into survival mode. Okay, all flight controllers, settle down, quit your guessing, let's start working this problem.
Okay, you got 2 good AC buses. What did all that tell you now?
It tells me that...
But Liebergott still has no clue what's happening, or how to fix it.
Well, just give me about 2 more minutes, Fly.
Okay, take your time.
I had to find out where the leak was and try to isolate it and try to save the remaining part of the oxygen. Otherwise, the crew's going to be dead.
Liebergott realizes his only hope of isolating the leak is to close valves that feed oxygen into 2 of the fuel cells. But closing these valves is irreversible. Those 2 fuel cells will not work again.
Okay, 13, this is Houston.
This is his final option. It is my final option.
It's a gamble, but it's their only chance. If it pays off, they'll have one remaining fuel cell to power them home.
We want you to close the react valve on fuel cell 3. Did I hear you right? That's affirmative.
The crew knows by shutting down 2 fuel cells, they won't have enough power to land on the moon.
It's over.
Capcom, we're go for landing.
Lovell and Hayes' dream of exploring the lunar highlands is shattered.
You felt sort of let down. I thought to myself, why did it happen on 13? Why didn't it do it first of all on Apollo 12 or wait till Apollo 14 to have the explosion?
I was sick of my stomach with disappointment because I knew we had lost the landing mission.
O2 tank 1.
But the crew's disappointment is soon forgotten. The oxygen leak has not been stopped.
The handwriting was on the wall, but it was obvious we're going to lose all power from the fuel cells.
Liebergott has played all his cards. He can see no way to prevent the total loss of power.
Roger, thank you.
It's like a gorge that wells up in your throat, and it's called panic. And I'm grabbing onto the TV monitors and hanging on for dear life, trying to figure out what I can do next.
We were some 200,000 miles now from Earth. We realized that we were losing all of our oxygen. The one and last fuel cell would die, and we'd lose all of our electricity. And we'd lose the entire propulsion system. We were in serious, serious trouble.
Without oxygen, the crew of Apollo 13 will not survive another day.
Roger.
The crew of Apollo 13 face a critical situation. To stay alive, they have only one option. They'll have to evacuate into the lunar module, Aquarius.
We want you to start getting over in the LEM and getting some power on that.
The lunar module has its own battery power supply and life support systems. It also has a duplicate navigation system, complete with gyroscope. Even so, the lunar lander is limited as a lifeboat. Its lightweight design is meant to accommodate just 2 men on a 2-day excursion to the moon.
When I got on the spacecraft, I suddenly realized what kind of a vehicle we're going to use to try to get ourselves back home again. The skin of the lunar module is so thin that you could punch a hole right through it.
But Lovell faces a more immediate problem. The oxygen leak is accelerating.
Okay, what's going to be the symptoms of this fuel cell starting to drop off?
The ground has computed that we only had about 15 minutes worth of oxygen left in the command module.
About 15 minutes worth of power left in the command module.
With time running out, the astronauts improvise emergency procedures. Lovell and Hayes begin to power up the lunar module. But the astronauts know their evacuation is only a temporary solution to their troubles. If they are ever to re-enter Earth's atmosphere, they must plan to return to the command module. It's the only ship with a heat shield. Swigert shuts down the command module and meticulously describes the position of every switch to mission control. Somehow, the dying ship must eventually be revived. But right now, nobody knows how to do this, or even if it's possible. In the lunar module, the astronauts turn on the navigation system. To be able to steer the ship accurately, Lovell's first job is to enter the orientation of the spacecraft into the navigation computer. Lovell handles the critical task of transferring the coordinates from the command module's computer into the lunar module. But there is an extra complication.
The 2 vehicles are mated together, but their axes are not the same. Consequently, I have to take the information from the command module and then convert that to the axis of the lunar module.
Lovell must complete his calculations before the command module's power fails, when the vital computer data will be erased. Without the coordinates, the ship will be lost in space. As the pressure mounts, Lovell starts to doubt his mental arithmetic.
I asked mission control because I wanted to be sure. I said, here's the angles, you check my arithmetic.
Make sure we got a good course of line. Command module angles were 355, 57, 167. For you, your arithmetic looks good on the course of line there.
With Lovell's arithmetic getting the all clear, Hayes enters the coordinates into the lunar module's computer.
13, Houston, we'd like you to start making your way over to the limb now.
Swigert rejoins his crewmates. With the moon landing aborted, the men take stock of their situation. They're not concerned about breathing oxygen. In addition to the onboard supplies, Aquarius has 2 oxygen backpacks meant for moonwalking.
We had an abundance of oxygen. We had 2 backpacks full. Each of those almost was a day's supply.
But other consumables are in limited supply. The lunar module has enough battery power and water to support 2 men for 2 days. Earth is at least 3 days away, and there are 3 astronauts. They realize their escape from the command module may just have postponed the inevitable.
I looked over at Fred, and he said, you know, Jim, we're not going to get home because these batteries are going to die. They're only good for 45 hours. We're not even around the moon yet.
The lunar module is looking less like a lifeboat, more like a tomb. The unfolding drama in space instantly reignites press interest in the mission.
There was an explosion.
And the network TV coverage pulls no punches.
Their oxygen supply is in jeopardy, and their water supply is officially termed critical.
One of the networks gives the crew a 10% chance of survival. In Houston, Krantz assembles a team of troubleshooters from the consoles, the Tiger team. But they know the chances for success are slim. Among them is John Aaron, a 27-year-old engineer.
We were sitting around that room and we were just commiserating. Everybody was just kind of saying, golly, what happened? This should never have happened. This thing looks kind of impossible.
Krantz's first task is to motivate his team.
How much time do we have?
You must make things happen, and that was to be my job. We didn't know, but we had to believe, and that was essential for us to keep believing so that we could deliver what I needed.
Krantz's most immediate concern is changing Apollo 13's programmed course.
It's going to go to the moon, but if you don't do anything, it would come back and miss Earth.
Now it's our job to get our boys safely back.
He needs to get the ship onto a course that will intercept Earth.
So how do you feel about making a 16 foot per second burn in 37 minutes?
Tiger team tell Lovell of the plan for a course change.
Well, we'll give it a try, Jack.
Before the crew can initiate the burn, Lovell must point the ship in the right direction. But when Lovell tries to carry out the maneuver, the ship begins to twist, out of control.
Bill, I want to get out of this roll.
He can't understand what's going on.
I spent hundreds of hours learning how to fly a lunar module. Why isn't it responding to my inputs?
That's not the way that's supposed to act. It sure isn't the way it acted before.
Lovell quickly figures out what's happening. He is trained to fly the lander when it's free of the command module. But now, with its dead mass still clamped to the top of the ship, its reaction to the controls are totally different.
My maneuvering inputs were completely screwed up. I had to learn to maneuver all over again.
I can't take that doggone roll out.
It's not just an inconvenience.
Let me get around though. Let's roll. Let roll all the way. Yeah, you can't let it roll all the way. I know.
Extreme movements of the spaceship could cause the gimbals cradling the all-important gyro to align, a situation called gimbal lock. Apollo 13 would then lose track of its orientation in space.
Better watch that no gimbal over.
Gimbal lock is not a good thing.
Roger, we're watching that little gimbal.
It takes every ounce of Lovell's piloting skill to get to grips with the ship's top-heavy configuration.
I think I can control the spacecraft right now.
With the spaceship finally under control, Hayes programs the computer with Houston's instructions for the critical course change.
The purpose is mid-course correction for free return.
With the service module out of action, Lovell must use the lunar lander's engine to make the burn. 6 hours after the explosion, the computer fires up the engine. And Apollo 13 accelerates onto a course that will take it around the moon and should intercept Earth. It's one small victory, but their situation is desperate. They will run out of power before they're even halfway home.
Houston?
The Tiger team is brutally honest.
They said, we understand your situation, and you're in very deep trouble right now, and in the way you are, you probably will not get back.
Without power, the astronauts will be unable to control their ship. They could end up in permanent orbit around the Earth. An eerie memorial to the space program. The crew of Apollo 13 are in dire trouble. They've had to abort the moon landing and are now in a fight for survival. At NASA's Mission Control in Houston, Gene Kranz's Tiger team is the astronauts' only hope.
I recognized that the solution for this problem was in our hands.
It's only temporary.
The main issue is a lack of power. The lunar lander batteries will only last for 40 hours, and the crew is about 70 hours from Earth. The Tiger team decide to attack the problem from 2 angles. They could extend battery life by somehow reducing power consumption. But it's a high-risk strategy. It means shutting down vital systems like the navigation computer. They decide to hold off on such a radical move. The Tiger team also consider maneuvers that could bring the ship back to Earth more quickly. This approach offers immediate results. They calculate that by burning the lunar module's engine again at just the right time, they might shave an astonishing 12 hours off the return journey.
Okay, Jim, we're gonna get back with you shortly with some burn guidelines.
This big burn will last for more than 4 minutes and take place an hour after they emerge from the dark side of the moon. But there's a problem. A question mark hangs over the ship's orientation in space. Lovell is still worried that he might have messed up the guidance data in the lunar module.
We had transferred the coordinates, but we didn't know whether they were really good or not.
Even a tiny error will be amplified over the 250,000-mile trip to Earth. The big burn will use up most of the lunar lander's fuel. If Apollo 13 heads off in the wrong direction, there won't be enough left to correct its course. It's essential to verify 13's orientation before the massive engine burn. Lovell must rely on what generations of seafarers have used before him: the stars. If Lovell can get a bearing on 3 known stars through the ship's navigation telescope, he can verify the ship's attitude. But it's not that simple. When he tries to look for the stars he needs, he sees a vast, unfamiliar star field.
I was amazed to see thousands of stars, much more than I would normally see, and realized then that these stars were not stars, but were part of debris caused by the explosion.
Right now, there are about 1,000 or so false stars out here from some of the debris.
Getting a bearing is impossible.
It's hard to discern what's real and not real.
All they could clearly identify was the sun, the earth, and the moon.
The Tiger team bring their collective experience to bear and realize that the solution is right in front of them.
Okay, what we're getting a procedure...
It might be possible to use the sun itself to verify the ship's attitude. The plan is to tell the computer to maneuver the ship so that the telescope points at one corner of the sun. If it gets it right, they will have proved the computer knows where it is.
Kind of an imprecise method, don't you?
It's totally unorthodox to rely on the enormous disk of the sun for an attitude fix.
It's like aiming at a barn door.
For this particular crew, this is something radically new, something very different.
Lovell engages the autopilot, and Apollo 13 begins to search for the sun. If the computer manages to hit the target and the telescope captures the sun, Lovell can be confident the big burn will not send them off in the wrong direction.
Suddenly he saw the sun coming into view.
What do you got? Get ready, upper right corner of the sun.
And then the spacecraft stopped right there with the sun in the telescope.
You got it.
We're hot.
Houston, Aquarius. It looks like the sun checked fast.
We're kind of glad to hear that.
Good job, everybody.
As Apollo 13 approaches the dark side of the moon, the crew's luck appears to be changing. But even if they solve their power problems and get back to Earth orbit, they know that ultimate survival depends on getting through Earth's atmosphere without burning up. Their plan calls for the command module to be brought back from the dead. But when they abandoned the ship 20 hours earlier, its main oxygen supply was completely gone, and its fuel cells useless. A pessimistic Lovell realizes the disaster will mean the end of space exploration.
I said to Fred, take a good look at the moon. It'll be a long time before someone else gets up here.
In Houston, Krantz too is deeply worried about how to bring the command module back to life. He puts his best men on the case. John Aaron has a reputation as an ingenious problem solver.
Any plan is better than no plan at all. It's easy to get overwhelmed. I started to work the problem backwards. I said, you know, rather than being impossible, what would make it possible?
We could do that. That could work.
But right now, as the spaceship swings back into the sunlight, the astronauts focus on the next critical burn.
Jim, you go for the burn. Roger, understand, go for the burn.
Just under 79.5 hours into the mission, Lovell engages the autopilot for the big burn.
We heard the engine start, then it was throttled up. We throttled up to about 40%.
Apollo 13 accelerates to 6,000 kilometers per hour
100%.
in the hope of giving the crew some chance of survival.
We were confident that we were going to come home basically about 2/3 of a day faster.
We don't have enough power.
But even with this improved return time, the Tiger team know the lunar lander batteries will be dead long before the crew reaches Earth. So they have worked out a radical power-saving scheme to extend the life of the batteries. The crew must reduce power consumption to just 12 amps, about the same as a household blender.
We had to power down the guidance system, turn it off. We had to power down the computer. Really all we had going for us was a radio to talk back to the Earth and a little fan to circulate the atmosphere.
The big assumption Krantz has made in switching off the guidance systems is that Apollo 13 no longer needs to make course changes. But what nobody can see is a wispy vapor emerging from the lunar module's electronics cooling system. On the long haul to Earth, this tiny jet will push the ship off course. As the ship cruises homeward, another time bomb is ticking. With every breath, the three men exhale carbon dioxide. This toxic gas can kill.
Okay, Houston, we just got a man bomb in
The lunar module has scrubbers to remove the CO2 from the air, but there are 3 men breathing in a space meant for only 2. Soon it uses up its supply of scrubbers,
Houston, say again.
and CO2 levels are now dangerously high.
CO2 was getting hot.
We saw the partial pressure of carbon dioxide gaining and gaining on us. We knew that we had to do something.
The astronauts would love to use the spare scrubbers from the command module, but they are the wrong shape for the lunar module.
I kept thinking, why did the people who built the environmental system in the command module use square canisters in the command module and round ones in the lunar module?
Back on Earth, A team has been working on this deadly problem for the last 24 hours and have improvised a way to fit the square scrubbers from the command module into the round holes in the lunar module.
Okay, we want you to take the tape and cut out 2 pieces about 3 feet long or a good arm's length.
Now it's up to the exhausted astronauts to reproduce this life support machine themselves.
They told us to tear off a piece of duct tape about the length of your arm.
Make 2 belts around the sides of the canister.
Take a cover off of one of your flight manuals, it's cardboard.
Use it to form an arch over the top of the canister. Just tuck one.
And then see if there's an old sock around.
Cut off a piece of sock and stuff it in there, or you could probably even crumple up some tape and use that, over.
Okay, Houston.
With CO2 levels hovering near the deadly threshold, the astronauts plug their creation into the scrubber system. And they wait.
Then all of a sudden, very perceptibly, you could see the needle start to go down again, and we were very happy about it.
From the moment Apollo 13 left Earth, its course has been tracked by Mission Control. On Wednesday morning, Kranz's trajectory team give him some bad news. The ship has drifted off course, and they have no idea why.
We don't understand what is happening, but we're going to miss the Earth.
A spaceship can safely enter the Earth's atmosphere only within a narrow range of angles, the entry corridor.
If it comes in too steep, it's going to burn up. If it comes in too shallow, it's going to ricochet off the Earth's atmosphere just like a stone does off water.
The ship's entry angle is too shallow, and the crew must perform an emergency maneuver. It's another nightmare scenario. To save power, they've turned off all the guidance systems they normally rely on for course corrections.
I said, well, look at, we've turned off all of our navigational aids.
Houston?
We're sort of flying by the seat of our pants here.
Lovell must take control of the spacecraft himself. He maneuvers the ship so the engine is at right angles to the direction they are traveling.
That would then place my descent engine in a position to steepen up or shallow out that angle on the way home.
Lovell must keep the Earth in the center of his eyepiece during the burn. But keeping on the right course will be extremely difficult without the autopilot. If they're going to pull off this maneuver, the 3 men must work as a team.
I said, Fred, when that engine comes on, I will never be able to keep the Earth in the window by myself. You keep the Earth from going sideways too much with your maneuvering handle. Jack Swiker told me when to start the engine. I did.
Ignition.
Lovell and Hayes slug it out with the spacecraft.
Holding steady and yaw.
I jockeyed the Earth vertically. Fred was jockeying it horizontally.
7.
Pitch and roll okay.
8.
Keep it centered, Fred.
9. 10. 11.
14 seconds later, Jack said stop and hit the stop button.
12.
Almost there, Fred.
14.
Shut down.
Shut down.
And it worked like a champ. We tracked them for about a half hour, and they were right back within our proper reentry corridor.
The crew can only hope they need no more course changes. With just over a day left until hitting Earth orbit, Lovell checks out their re-entry vehicle. Without power, it will be useless to the astronauts. Engineer John Aaron has been struggling to find a way to resuscitate the command module for the last 4 days. He has just 3 tiny batteries to sustain the ship through the rebooting process and make it safely to splashdown. He's simulated dozens of different power-up sequences, but he's still using too much energy. His big problem is that one of the batteries was partially drained during the evacuation. Aaron desperately needs to recharge it. He has an idea. In normal operation, the command module powers some systems in the lunar module. He wonders if there's a way to use these circuits to suck power back into the command module.
I found out that if you threw a whole slew of circuit breakers, we could reverse the power flow, back into the command module and turn on the battery charger.
But the idea of rewiring the spaceships horrifies Lovell.
And we said, no, we've got this all worked out. This will work now.
Okay, Jack, I have the procedure.
Aaron passes his new procedure to the astronauts.
Ready for you to bring the BMAGs on and warm up.
Okay, let's plan it.
The command module slowly awakes, one switch at a time, electrical systems paired to the bone.
Power up complete.
John Aaron has pulled off the impossible. It seems that the Tiger team have overcome their final challenge, and the crew can now concentrate on preparing for re-entry. In preparation for final re-entry, Swigert jettisons the defunct service module.
3, 2, 1.
Jettison.
For the first time, the source of their troubles drifts into view.
And there's one whole side of that spacecraft missing.
As it came around, we saw that the entire panel had been blown off.
Almost from the base to the engine. Really a mess.
It was a real surprise seeing the damage. 1/4 of the spacecraft gone.
The destruction extends to where the command module's heat shield had been.
Man, that's unbelievable.
The crew are concerned that the shield could be damaged too.
We privately were worried about the heat shield, but there was nothing we could do.
I just put it out of my mind because, ready or not, we got to make this entry. And we'll find out.
With re-entry temperatures hitting 3,000 degrees centigrade, the heat shield is all that separates the men from a fiery death. After 6 days in space, Apollo 13 has limped back towards Earth orbit. The exhausted crew have transferred back into the command module and now cut the lunar module free.
Left jettison. Okay, copy that. Farewell, Aquarius, and we thank you.
We thought that we lost a good friend.
She sure was a good ship.
It was a miracle machine in a way and saved our lives.
The command module is now alone.
I know all of us up here want to thank all of you guys down there for the very fine job that you did.
Tell you, we all had a good time doing it.
4 days ago, Apollo 13's crew faced almost certain death. Inspired teamwork, self-belief, and pure piloting skill have successfully brought them to Earth orbit. But they now face the most dangerous phase of the mission. As the command module penetrates the atmosphere, friction creates a high-temperature plasma around the capsule, causing radio blackout. The silence should last for 3 minutes. The command module hits 40,000 kilometers per hour. If the heat shield has any sort of crack, the superheated gas will vaporize the astronauts inside. But what Lovell fears is a more drawn-out end. The re-entry parachutes could have been damaged and may fail to open. With the command module unable to slow down, millions of TV viewers would see the astronauts smash into the Pacific.
I thought of the family. My wife, she would see a hurtling command module slam into the ocean at 1,100 feet per second or something like that.
3 minutes passes. Radio blackout should be over.
Odyssey, Houston, standing by, over.
But the crew remains silent. Flight controllers begin to fear the worst.
Now we're 1 minute, and literally every controller is standing staring at those clocks. You're wondering what went wrong.
So it's a blackout period. For 3 minutes, we don't know just what's transpiring in the spacecraft.
I remember thinking, golly, we went through all this. Is this all there is? Is this the way this is going to end?
Despair begins to grip mission control.
Odyssey, Houston, standing by.
Well, he said, look at there's the chutes. That's right. You know, we're still in business here.
1 minute and 28 seconds later than expected, Apollo 13 emerges through the clouds.
It was the most beautiful sight in my life to watch a spacecraft swing on those 3 parachutes.
We made it. We're here. We cheated death once again. Those are the things we say.
I was very happy to be there, and it felt good to be in that warm South Pacific, 90+ degrees.
These guys were real heroes. Many of the controllers are just standing there crying.
We were very proud. We had snatched success out of the jaws of failure.
This team was cool.
But for some, this success is bittersweet.
I still felt disappointment for failing to execute the mission. If you're in the Super Bowl, you know, you're there, you're planning to win, right? That's your goal, and you lose.
In the wake of Apollo 13's narrow escape, NASA give their spacecraft a design makeover, adding an extra oxygen tank and battery into the service module, and extra water storage into the command module. Over the next 2.5 years, 4 more Apollo missions go ahead without any serious hitches, and another 8 men walk on the moon. During a press conference soon after Apollo 13's return, Jim Lovell is asked if he will be heading back into space.
I looked out into the audience and my wife was saying, no, with her thumbs down.
This was my 4th space.
So I said, no, I made 4 flights in space. Some people haven't made any. I will step aside. True story.
None of Apollo 13's crew ever returned to space.